Hi, I'm Richard Rogers, and I absolutely hope that you enjoy today's spiritual message. You know, we at Unity of Phoenix Spiritual Center are committed to helping people live better lives. We're going to provide you tools over and over, spiritual tools that allow you to live your best possible life. And if you want to leave a donation to continue to allow the work that we do to support other people just like you, we say thank you. Thank you for your generosity, because this ministry is committed to making the world a better place.
Good evening, everyone. Are you ready for a little fun this evening? Well, I'll see what I can do to accommodate you. I want to talk about a topic that's really kind of near and dear to my soul. The topic is time, space, and circumstance. This was the title of the second sermon I ever gave. My first sermon was 7 Steps to Heaven, and it was based on Miles Davis's song, music by the same name. There are actually no words to it, so I kind of borrowed the words of the 7-step creative process from the book of Genesis and created a sermon out of it. Time, space, and circumstance is kind of a different direction, though. It's a little bit off the beaten path, I'll say. A long time ago, there was a newspaperman by the name of Aldous Huxley who said that the spiritual journey does not consist of arriving at a destination where a person gains what he or she did not have or becomes what he or she is not. The journey, he said, consists in the dissipation or the elimination of one's own ignorance concerning oneself and life, and the gradual growth of that understanding, which begins the spiritual awakening, which he likened to the finding of God. He said the finding of God is a coming to oneself. One of the great scriptural stories that just kind of aligns with that idea is the Prodigal Son, in which much is made of the prodigal son's return to his father's house and to all that the father had. But we tend to pay little attention to the fact that he returned to himself. The scripture continues, he came to himself. So he returned to himself. And that's where he found who he truly was, who he had forgotten because he'd been asleep spiritually. And Carl Jung said, he who looks outside dreams, he who looks inside awakes. And that's what happened with the prodigal son. There's a hard truth to grasp in this multi-dimensional world that we live in. And because we tend to focus on what we can touch or what we can see with our physical attributes, we sometimes get stuck, and we can't figure out why we're stuck. And so what I want to do tonight is, if anyone is stuck, I want to challenge you to go a little deeper and to see things from a broader perspective. You know, when I thought about Huxley's comment, and he used the word ignorance in that statement, I know a number of people have read that statement and were offended by it. And we can often take defensiveness personal, or become defensive personally, but what Huxley meant is that we are sometimes unaware. And sometimes we're not only unaware, sometimes we don't pay attention in life to what's going on around us. And because of our unawareness, we tend to get in the way of our own progress, and we can miss out on opportunities that may not ever come our way again, because sometimes in the process of divine timing, special opportunities appear before us, and it's almost necessary that we take advantage of them at that point in time. Time is very important in every aspect of our life and every phase of this journey that we call life. And we also have to pay attention to every aspect of life and every phase of this journey to recognize the gift that time has for us. I'm going to share a couple of personal stories this evening at some point, so I want to remind myself not to go too long. But there comes a time in the spiritual journey when we have to start making choices from a very different place. And if a choice lines up so that it supports our health, our happiness, our wisdom, our health, our truth, our wisdom, our success, if it supports love, then we know it's the right choice. And if it does not support all of those things, it may be time for us to question the choice. So I know this from personal experience. We often try to find fulfillment by reaching goals or by satisfying desires. But a hard truth is there's no goal once it is reached that fully and completely satisfies. Let me say that again. There is no goal once it is reached that fully satisfies, nor is there any sense fulfillment that is permanent. I'm now and have been a goal setter for a long time, and I've accomplished pretty much everything I thought I wanted to accomplish from a sense perspective. But my choices often left me wanting more, and then, unfortunately, more. And more can occasionally be a little tricky, especially when we don't know why we want more. We just want more. It's kind of like the story about the grade school teacher welcoming her students back to school after the Christmas holidays, and she said to them, "I hope all you children had a nice holiday vacation and have returned to school with a little more sense than when you left." So the little boy sitting in the back said, "The same to you, Miss Jackson." Sometimes children know more than we think they know. Anyway, getting back on track here. A little background on this concept of time, space, and circumstance. It actually comes from this great little book called Time, Space, and Circumstance, and it's by Roy Eugene Davis, who was the spiritual director at the Center for Spiritual Awareness in Lakemont, Georgia. When I purchased this little book many years ago, it was $2.95. I think it's, last time I looked on Amazon, it's about $21. But I purchased it shortly after I had consciously began my spiritual journey, if you will. So on my first reading of the book, there were some very short and clear statements that drew me into it. And the first statement comes from the cover of the book. On the cover it states, and I quote, "Time, Space, and Circumstance, a complete, revised, and enlarged edition of the internationally acclaimed book that shows the way to realistic living in today's world. A comprehensive treatise on the path to higher metaphysical occult knowledge." Now, this book's only about 136 pages long. So I'm thinking, God, that's a whole lot of stuff for 130-some pages. So I need to check this out. So I bought it. Second statement that pulled me in, as I was kind of leafing through it, it pulled me in a little deeper. It says, to try to learn involved methods from books without inner understanding is to sometimes push too hard and incur problems. So I know a whole lot about hard pushing, because everything I've ever tackled, I just want to dive in head first and grab a hold, and sometimes like a little pit bull, don't know how to let loose when I should let loose. So that kind of piqued my interest. The third statement is this. It says, freedom in living means freedom to adjust attitudes, feelings, and viewpoints at will. No external cause is required. We can just do it. We can be happy or unhappy, confident or insecure, creative or frustrated, at will. So, at one level, time, space, and circumstance is about realistic living in today's world. It was written in, I think, around 1960, but that idea of today's world is continually ongoing. But while we're living realistically, we've also got to understand that each new day has its own variables, it has its own challenges, it has its own opportunities, and we've got to be adaptable and adjustable to be able to move and have our being in those. On another level, the book is about continually acquiring deeper spiritual knowledge, while at the same time working to increase our personal understanding of that knowledge. And that work should not be drudgery. It should be challenging, it should be stimulating, but it should never become drudgery. One thing we know about mysticism and mystics, the one thing that's common is the ability to laugh at life and to laugh at life's challenges. You can find it in every mystic you'll ever read, every mystic readings that you read. I think it was Ogmandino who said, laugh at yourself and at life, not in the spirit of derision or whining self-pity, but as a remedy or as a sort of miracle drug that will ease your pain and cure your depression and help you to put things into their proper perspective. And once you put them into that proper perspective, then what seemed like a terrible defeat will simply be just another experience. And that's a profound way to see life and to live life and to look at it. And then at yet another level, time, space, and circumstance is about being in the moment. Being in the moment fully so that all of your systems are functioning fully. And he stated it clearly when he said freedom in living means freedom to adjust attitudes, feelings, and viewpoints at will. So my first personal story. In March, I got a little sick from my allergies, and probably the first time I'd ever been really sick from my allergies. And so I went to my doctor, and he gave me some medication to take for the allergies, and told me I should take it easy for a little while. And so I left there with that information, went home, and got up the next day and did everything I typically do, and I carried on like that for about 3 weeks. Early April, late April, I knew I had a trip coming up to the Kentucky Derby, so I made plans for that, and I talked with my doctor about it, and he said, well, I'd advise against traveling. So I proceeded to travel to Louisville. I left Phoenix, it was 103 degrees. I got to Louisville, it was 44 degrees, raining, wind blowing. I had no jacket. I was there for a week, and I kept getting sicker and sicker and sicker. So made it through the week and through the weekend, and caught the plane back to Louisville and decided I'd better get to my doctor's office Monday morning. So I got to the doctor's office Monday morning, and when Doc came into my room, he said, what's going on? I said, Doc, I'm really not doing well at all. So he said, well, let me check you out. So he looked in my ears, up my nostrils, down my throat, and he said, you been traveling? I said, yes. So he folded up his computer and his little book. He just walked out of the office, out of the room. So he's gone about 10 minutes, I'm thinking, what's going on? So then he came back in, he looked at me and said, you're a piece of work. He said, nothing is changing. The medicine that you have, you're going to stay on it. And you're going to have to give it time to work. About 3 nights later, I woke up mid-morning, probably 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning, and I could hear my breath coming from my solar plexus, and balls of sweat were breaking out on me. I was sopping wet, and I couldn't breathe. And so I was in there moaning, and Mary came in, and she said, you want to go to the hospital? I said, no. So she went back to bed, and I moaned for another hour. She came in, you want to go to the hospital? Yeah. Got up, put my clothes on, and headed to the hospital, and I got to thinking about the hospital. I said, shoot, I'll die in the hospital. I'm going back home. So I went back home and made it through the night and thought I'd crossed the threshold. The next night, I woke up and literally thought I was dying. Literally. My right leg was paralyzed from the knee down. And I managed to pull myself out of the bed and get up and stand and massage my legs until I could get some life back in them. And then I got back in the bed and I said, well, if it's time to go, it's time to go. So I must have drifted off to sleep sometime later, and the next morning I awakened and I could tell that I'd kind of crossed that threshold between healing and wholeness and life and death. And so it's been sort of a process since then of making better decisions, adjusting my attitudes, and my feelings, and my viewpoints. And I'm continuing to do that. But the process of adjusting requires some effort on our part, and it requires that we be able to extend our awareness into our entire being, and the body and the mind and the spirit, and into the entire field of consciousness. I can't say this enough. We are more than we think we are. We are much more than we think we are. We are stronger than we think we are. And at the same time I say that, it's also wise that we learn how to take care of ourselves. Intuitively, we get flashes of this reality of how much power is within us. But sometimes we don't trust those flashes because they kind of scare us. You know, the interesting thing about Western society, we probably are the only society who does not trust their intuition. Most of the indigenous cultures in this world, the so-called primitive people, live by their intuition. They trust their instincts, and because they do, they continue to thrive and survive. And ironically, other than a few well-meaning missionaries, no one tries to convince them that their intuition is the devil's work or that it can't be trusted. So a couple of other great points that he makes in this book are one about the transformative power of meditation. And meditation is the thing that really hooked me into my journey once I began to practice it and to begin to get better at it. It literally helped to change my life. But he also talks about the importance of self-knowledge and the importance of being able to evaluate ourselves openly and honestly. And he gives at least 25 self-evaluation questions that are powerful. And I'm going to share a few of them just for the heck of it, but I don't want to try to share all 25. 1, what is my greatest strength? You ever ask yourself that? 2, what is my major weakness? Ever ask yourself that? What is my major fear? What is my highest hope? What's the greatest mistake I've ever made? Do I really forgive other people? What would I like to erase from my memory? Powerful question. Am I truthful with myself? Do I hate anyone? And if so, why? Do I fear anyone? If so, why? If I have failed in the past, why? What is my concept of God? Am I really serious about my spiritual path? So that's just a few of the great questions that we can actually use to take a look for ourselves, not to condemn or to blame ourselves, but just to examine the thoughts and the feelings and the attitudes that we have and examine them honestly and then move forward intelligently. So this is a book that I'm more than fond of. It's a book that I love. And even today, many years later, I'm amazed at how much information is in there and how many different recommendations he sends us toward in order to be able to fulfill our life's destiny. Final story. I want to talk about awareness and how sometimes we are unaware of the subconscious stuff that takes place in our minds. 1979, I believe, yeah. I'd been given a business opportunity, an opportunity to open my own menswear shop, something that I, as a young person, dreamed of doing and really thought that that was the greatest thing in life I could ever do. So I've been through the entire process. I've gone to the Small Business Administration, been able to secure financing, been able to find a place to rent in the downtown mall in Louisville, and life was about to take off. So I was sitting in service that coming Sunday morning, and the minister was talking about having a definiteness of purpose what is it you want to do with your life? And so I thought, yeah, I want to open this store, and I want to sell lots of menswear. So after the service, I went up to the minister. I said, could I come in and chat with you? And he said, sure. I said, when would you like to do that? I said, well, I'll be here Tuesday morning for the class. How about then? He said, yeah, that'd be great. We can have lunch, and then we can talk all you want. So Monday, I was anticipating my visit, and so much so that I couldn't sleep that Monday night. That Tuesday morning, got up, cleaned myself up, and went in for my appointment. We chatted a little bit in his office, and then we decided to go out a couple of blocks away to a hotel that had a restaurant for lunch. We got there at lunch, and I pulled out my business plan. I showed it to him. He looked through it, and he said, wow, that's an incredible business plan. He said, let me ask you a question. I said, sure. He said, what would you really like to do? So for the first time in my life, I heard these words coming out of my mouth. What I'd really like to do is be a unity minister. Something that I decried a couple of years earlier that I'd never do. I heard these words coming out of my mouth. Now, how does one make that kind of shift and not know that one is making that kind of shift? You see, the subconscious holds a lot of deep stuff, and sometimes we don't actually know what we want. And that's why it's so important to be willing to delve down and to do the kind of spiritual work necessary to find out. Not only from the standpoint of what we want, but how we want to live and what we want to experience in life and where we want this spiritual journey to take us. It's a profound experience, but it really does require a lot of effort and a lot of work. But it can be fun. I mean, where else can you find such hilarious opportunities to laugh at yourself? So that's time, space, and circumstance, folks. God bless.